Kasi nga.
It always bothers me in Zoom. It's just like recording in progress. Yeah, okay, fine.
Kasi,
Hi, Borge. Hi. Ano, magtatagalog ba tayo ngayon o? Kasi,
we
ngayon ay tungkol sa wikang Filipino.
Try mo.
Ngayon ang buwan ng wika. Ha?
Try mo.
Try?
Try mo. Ako hindi. I will not dare. Again.
Well, one of these days, we should have like an all Filipino one. Pero subukan natin kahit paano yung
naman?
halo-halo. Yung Taglish to flex our Conyoisness, you know.
Ikaw na, wag mo ko isama dyan.
Talaga.
Wag mo ko isama dyan.
Well, bilang celebration.
Pagdiriwang.
Salamat. Ayun. Sa buwan ng wika, tatalakayin natin ang wikang Pilipino. Ano ba ang mga issue ngayon sa wikang Pilipino? What's the problem? Because honestly, sa totoo lang, pag ginagawa natin yung PI Raw, actually, para sa akin, pag di ko alam kung anong atake ko sa anong ganitong topic, basta alam ko lang na kailangan natin pag-usapan, pero bang di ko alam.
No. We have been, again, like the first PI role, we have been brewing this topic for a while. I mean, we have discussed the difficulties in our languages, especially in utilizing Filipino. Pero again, I don't want to comment on existing academic debates on our Filipino language right now, but probably an overview. Again, there are some who are criticizing the very roots of so-called Filipino language. Again, kasi it was instituted by Manuel Quezon. It's primarily based on Tagalog, so the other ethno-linguistic groups are not represented. So that is one approach, so a historical one. I think the other dimension of the debate would be about what should we call the other sub-languages? Are they
even sub-languages? That's very dangerous of you, Borja.
Are they sub-languages, or are they dialects, or are they actual languages that are dominant? So
actually, the weird thing is that I'm not sure if you saw this on social media, but they don't use buwan ng wika. Buwan ng mga wika, the multiple plural languages. So we're celebrating not only Tagalog as Filipino, but also Bisaya, Ilocano, Hiligaynon. Bakit?
Okay.
Tumawa ka dyan sa Hiligaynon.
Naisip ko lang sa Ilocano. Mura agad ang naisip ko eh.
Sige nga, sample nga.
Isa sa Ilocano, ukininam.
Ano?
Ukininam.
Lakasan mong boses mo, Board.
Ayoko nga. No. It's a curse word. It's a curse word.
Nakikinig ba yung mga magulang natin dito?
Ayoko ko. I don't curse without any targets. That's just something that you need to know. I never curse without any targets. So I'm a bit coy about you analyzing curse words. Pero kung may target ako, putang ina mo.
Si Duque, sige. Yung mga
okay. Yan na naman yung latest news. So,
i-slice natin?
Slice natin. Well, I think everything that has been said about that. But one of our colleagues, Reden Resio, I think he also reflected an approach by another one of our good friends, Julian Canandang. I think Jules would probably say that, again, purchasing in bulk is a practice in government, because whenever you purchase, you need to purchase large amounts. So, kasi, again, you need backup. So you cannot constantly buy shit with government budget. That's why meron kang espasyo. You need allowance for consumption. I think Reden, in one of his posts, he actually raised the possibility that there are thoroughly expensive laptops, the powerful ones. There are powerful laptops that would require
700,000.
Not only the 700,000, but you need to make allowances for its repair. Its repair, its maintenance, and its even training in utilizing the damn things. So again, if we don't have a corrupt government, the 700,000 will not really be subject to so much scrutiny.
Teka lang. Yung paksa natin ngayon ay tungkol sa wika, hindi corruption. Pero, sige. Well, sugot ko lang dyan ay, naintindihan ba ng mga taong bayan kung bakit ganyan? Kung hindi, malamang kikita nila, 700,000, apat lang na piraso. Malamang may mga mga dagdag na mga proseso sa sinabi mo baka dagdag spare charger. So
ikaw nga walang ka ng charger sa Shanghai.
Hindi.
Mo?
Grabe, labasan lang tayo ng
labasan ng nawawalan charger. Nasira ka ng charger sa Shanghai.
Lahat namang sikreto, ang buhay natin parang grabe yung diretso yung Tagalog ko ngayon. Grabe. Agosto ngayon.
linggo na buwan ng hika yan.
Buwan ng mga wika. Actually, I don't think it was ba sa debate niyo na parang hindi, ang dami nating wika tapos maliban sa Tagalog. Pero naman sa ating sistema ng edukasyon, Tagalog ang
ginagamit.
Karaniwang ginagamit, diba?
At saka sa pamahalaan, pag nagsasalin tayo ng mga ordinansa o batas. Ang mga batas natin marami sa English. So mas isa pang dagdag na issue 'yan. Kaya hindi matanggal-tanggal ang English bilang pangunahing wika sa pamahalaan kasi hindi pa natin lubos na nabubuo ang Filipino bilang wika, bilang kapalit ng English.
Pero in fairness, isa lang ang presidente na nagsusona ng Tagalog, si
Pinoy.
Yumaong na dating presidente na si Benigno Aquino III o si Noynoy Aquino. Rest in peace. Yeah. Siya nawa.
That's another thing that I would give credit to him na sa Tagalog nga siya. Bakit si Duterte naman Tagalog gibberish?
Mas siya. Tagalog ng lasing.
Wikang lasing yun hindi naman English, hindi Tagalog, wikang lasing lang yun. Ay naku, kawawa yung teleprompter. You try it.
You try it. Winarak. Ano ba yung winarak?
Winarak is to tear it. Yan. Kaya nga sabi ko kanina, I think I posted it. Bakit nga ba winarak ang ginamit? Runner-up lang yung scriptwriter ni Duque. Kasi winarak is usually tearing it apart. So, ang winarak ginagamit rin sa kung saan-saan dyan. medyo bastos ang background ng winarak.
Oh my God. Oh God.
Ang comment ko lang dun sa isang kaibigan ko, the butt hurt kasi.
The butt. In fairness, ang konyo ka rin, ha? The butt hurt. Yun ba yung wala pang salita?
Pwedeng isali ng winarak sa ganun nga kasi nga medyo may pagka isang bahagi ng wika natin masyadong bastos. Malaswa ang wika natin kasi
malaswa ang wika natin.
Ang lipunan kasi natin again. Sa ko ba nabanggit to? I think I already mentioned this one. Our society is not we are not a society of prudes. I mean, we are a society of prudes. Yeah, prudes. Yeah, we are deeply in touch with our sexuality. But then again, we have
sexuality talaga.
Our as a society. So then again, 300 years worth of Spanish shit. So
and Catholicism.
Yeah, Catholicism. But we haven't lost touch of that. Kaya dumadami ang kalaswaan ng wika natin.
Like people say that our society is conservative. Probably polite society. In other words, gitnang uri pataas, di ba? Pag mayaman pero ang karaniwang Pilipino ay malaswa. At kahit kahit mga gitnang uri pataas, malaswa din sila. Mas social lang at imported ang kalaswaan nila.
Polite society is what's the root of polite society? Such as a thing. Yeah, there is such a thing as polite society, but that is just just one dimension of society as a whole. Anyway, so regarding our language, okay, going back, I think what we can talk about is, I don't want to go into the debates really. So, whenever you ask me about the debates, I seriously have no concrete opinion on it. I am a practitioner. I use language. Language rather than.
And you translated the book of Machiavelli in Tagalog. So just reminding our listeners that,
Putang hirap. That's one of the hardest to discuss deep philosophy, because again the introduction is also written in Filipino, so I also discuss some philosophical backgrounds, Machiavelli's relationship with the likes of Nietzsche and Fichte. So just imagine me discussing Nietzsche and Germans in Tagalog. So that's
ba't hindi mo na lang i-post yung ano niya yan para makita ng mga tao? Ay kung hindi nila mabili sa DLSU Press, di makita na lang sa academy.edu para dami.
Ewan ko, that is...
Bawal ba?
I think it is not allowed. But if I would upload anything, I would probably upload the manuscript itself, not the soft copy of it. I would rather see my books available in secondhand bookstores than in dealership who's not really selling the damn thing at this point. Wala nga sila Shopee. So, God, it's frustrating. But yeah, I think my question to you: have you ever written anything academic using Filipino?
That's a very grabe ka word, Sa totoo lang, fair. Well, to be fair, I managed to write a paper on the my claim to fame, at least academic in Philippines, nakipag-orals ako sa Tagalog. Oo, grabe tawa ka dyan. Pero yun, 2 beses. Nung una, kay Father Roque Pelios na pumanaw na, rest in peace, Father Roque. Tungkol sa siya yung philosopher ng meron. Ganyan. Meron.
Meron.
Binola ko siya.
Meron, hindi meron.
I managed to scrape a C+ from that. Yeah. So I was impressed with myself, actually, coming from someone who came from, Colegio San Agustin, which is a Conyo school. And I primarily, when people ask me, your English is so good. I said, where do you live in the States? Like, no, just years of cable. This is a cable accent. But at least in college, I managed to at least, again, ibudol ko yung professor ko sa sa philosophia, once. And the other one, I think, is in philosophy of religion. I managed to discuss Kant and Spinoza in Tagalog.
Nice.
Kanta ko. Pero pag
Kant. Kant.
This is an explicit raw
Kant
podcast.
Emmanuel
PI podcast.
Kant.
We're cursing SPG. Anyway. Pero pagsulat hindi pa. Pero ang dami kong balak magsalin ng mga magsalin ng mga bagay-bagay.
Binalak mo isalin si Marcus Aurelius dati Meditations.
Oo nga sinumunod ko lang pero parang tinatamad May oras naman ako pagkaso
disiplina yan, anak ng pitong kong chinelasin kita.
Wow, isa pa yun.
Matatapos
yan. Yan ang mga mura ni Borge. 1950.
but seriously, if you can... panahon ni Aguinaldo ni panahon ni Aguinaldo, hindi pa chinelas yun. Siyempre ang... ano tawag doon? Bakya! Hampasin kita ng bakya Bakyang to.
Ayan, lumalabas na yung lumang Tagalog.
Bakya kasi, again, you're familiar with the Dutch wooden shoes. Did you call me? Yung
clogs,
clogs, that's our clog. So bakya, may kahoy tayo na sapatos dati. Lalo ko yung lola ko ng bakya. So, hindi ka pwedeng pinalo ka ng bakya, patay ka.
Aray, nga ang sakit nun. But one thing that but
seriously, I think there's a rise right now. There's a growing interest in Stoicism in the Philippines. So I would suggest that you
start.
No, you already started. That you persist. You persist. Marcus Aurelius' work is just small snippets. You can just do one per day.
Well, now that you heard it here, folks, I'm starting my translation. So feel free to para hampasin ko sa lahat ng mga prof ko sa Pilipino. Ayan, kayang-kaya ko yan. Akala mo, hindi mo kaya. Manipis naman, pero malakas yung hampas para dinig. Anyway.
And you can you can also write a critique of Stoicism. You're relatively critical of Stoicism, so you can write that into the introduction.
Yeah. But I think that's, just to connect it to what we're doing, you and I have been trying to translate concepts of political science in Tagalog in PS Eskwela. In fairness, tinapos natin yung mga teorya ng Estado. To be fair, nahirapan tayo, di ba?
Yeah.
Hindi natin matapos-tapos. Sinubukan natin magawa ng bagong serye ng PI Eskwela. Pero yun, tungkol sa politika, hindi natin matapos-tapos kasi nahihirapan din tayo. dami natin ginagawa, pero parang ang hirap din kasi it's not easy. Ang hampang politika or political science is largely, Western. It's a Western discipline, and a lot of the concepts can be translated, but it's difficult to discuss even. And there are unique things that can be, how you say, not necessarily translated, but adapted, even articulated in Tagalog. I mean, but it's not that simple, which is why I think in order for us to have like a sturdy foundation of, again, political science in the vernacular or sa pangkaraniwang Tagalog, ang dami natin, ang dami pang dapat gawin. Isalin. Ang daming dapat, what's the word? Bigas na dapat kainin, di ba? Tama ba?
Huwag mong kainin ng bigas na magsastuck sa appendix mo. Wala ka na pala appendix. Okay, kumain ka ng bigas. But yeah, the thing is, again, whenever we discuss language, I think something that we agree on is that whatever language we're using, it reflects a part of our personality. So our personalities change in line with what language we use.
Yeah.
So whenever I'm using English, I think I'm more suitable for now, I'm more suitable to write academic works in English because that reflects my relatively objective, cool-headed dimension. So you need that to write academic works. My Filipino, however, reflects my more aggressive personality. I think you have seen some of my rhetorical polemics in Tagalog. Yung mga sinasamit ko sa mga sketchy websites to get likes. Just rile people up. And that is me being a polemicist. So, nainitin ang ulo ko pag nagtatagalog. Either that or I speak straight or diretso ako sa pagtagalog kasi. And again, straight thinking doesn't really fit with doesn't entirely fit with academic analysis na marami pa pasikot-sikot. You know, one experience that I would like to share regarding yung book chapter ko para kay Professor Contreras. So I needed to analyze alienation in Filipino. So I basically was forced to actually translate alienation, and I observed that I write in more simple terms in Filipino. So mas madali akong kausap pag Tagalog kasi my vocabulary is not that. It's not that kinakalawang ng vocabulary ko sa Filipino.
Nangangalawang? Tama ba?
Nangangalawang. Yeah, nangangalawang ni. So again, the last long academic work on Filipino that I wrote was way back in 2011. So in a while.
Mahirap, mahirap, pero I think it is worth it and I think it is necessary.
Well, we don't know. I mean, again, I think we should look for political scientists who manage to teach political science in Tagalog.
Certon.
But talaga? Si Certon Contreras?
Yeah, he can.
Oh, wow. Hindi hindi Taglish purong Tagalog?
Hindi naman puro. He whenever he switches English, straight English, then Tagalog, straight Tagalog. Hindi yung halo-halo sa isang not mixed in one sentence.
Isa pa yun, I will get into the mutations of the English and Tagalog together later, but my God. But yeah, I share in that because, well, I think there's this old article that, not too old, but around 2013-14, which said that, like what you said, a lot of serious scientific language and professional language, academic language is largely English. And even I'm reading this book in the 1960s when they're talking the debates for the national language. Even like laws and official proceedings were in English. And what is left for Tagalog is either when you're talking to your driver, your maids, your yayas, your employees. So there's already this psyche wherein, even in society, wherein this language is set for certain spheres of life, which necessarily, sorry to say, I don't like it, but low spheres and high spheres. Even the high art or high literature is usually reserved for English, and then the Tagalog is usually low art. I mean, if you look at our broadsheets are largely Philippine Daily Inquirer, Philippine Star, Manila Times, all in complete English. But we look at, is there a Tagalog broadsheet? No. Bulatlat, Abante, ano pa, the tabloids. They're tabloids. So even, I think, a very old prejudice with regards to languages is in our print media. Even our novels that are in Tagalog are, well, either translations of older literature, which is originally in Spanish, or completely like low literature, the Precious Hearts romance, the erotic fiction, which is quite unfortunate. I mean, feel free to correct us, but I think even from my own study and experience, it's just the division is very clear, and it's no wonder, like, even when you say it, when you try to elevate the Tagalog language, it's difficult, and it's even, you're forced to write simply. So I empathize with that.
It can be done. That's one thing. It can be lifted. Yeah. I'm doing my own part to try to lift it by, again, starting to write more works in Tagalog. I have 2 more papers in line that I will write in Filipino. Pero mahirap nga talaga. Regarding laws and language, let me just entertain the based on your our basically our complaints, or basically your main complaint in our PI nyo section, that the law right now, the profession of law, the sphere of legislation is filled with the relatively secret language of technicalities. I'm entertaining the possibility that if we start using Filipino in our laws, we would be forced to make it simpler. And that is what lawyers don't want. And that is what legislators don't want. They don't want the laws to be understood. They don't want laws to be simple. That's why they keep on using English. Because if they would start using Filipino, it would eventually be simple. Because our language, the beauty of our language, ang kagandahan ng Filipino, ay ito yung nag-uudyok sa isang mananalita na maging elegante at simple.
Payak o simple.
Yeah, maging elegante at simple. At yun ang wala sa mga batas natin. Again, our laws are filled with technical mumbo-jumbo, and if we start using Filipino, those mumbo-jumbos will not have any space. So we would be forced to make it simple.
Well, take note. It's also entertain the possibility that even Tagalog at certain times can be very deep and very labyrinthine, or like minsan nakakalutang yung pag may mga tao na nagdidiretso, lalo na sa mga dula sa in UP or in Ateneo, magdiretso, parang ay wow, parang it's like they're casting a spell on you because it's old language. Halos naglalatin na sila.
Ano lang yung matanda lang yung wika, kaya mukhang komplikado.
If they want to make it, they'll have to use that old language, and there might be a few people who can. They might find these people,
Hindi naman kailangan. You can use Filipinos in its current form. You don't really need to. But probably if you want to make it elegant, if you want in the realm of literature, I think. Yeah. Probably, but again, languages are founded on social activities. If a language dies, if it's no longer being used, parts of languages dies and evolves in line with usage. So we need to start using Filipino as it is being used right now. Yeah. Albeit it can be a bit what we call esoteric, if you would say that. Right. Is esoteric the appropriate term? Esoteric or esoteric would be.
You could say alienating.
if you can use the old Tagalog. So ako minsan ginagamit ko pa rin.
And I think the only way that to give credit to at least the indie music industry, or just the music scene, thanks to bands like Ben and Ben, Four of Spades, there's beauty in their use of the Filipino language. I mean, again, they might have peaked early, and their early work is still better. They haven't really recaptured that early beauty, but their songs in Tagalog, in fairness, derecho, may lalim, may it's musical. So I think that's well, that it shows skill in language and development and maturity if you're able to sing your language. If you're able to sing, kung kaya mo ikanta yung inyong wika.
Kung kaya mong iawit.
Iawit.
Ngayon at kailanman.
Ngayon at kailanman. I know. I remember a specific person. But yeah, so I think that's what's keeping the Filipino language alive, to be honest. So thank you, Ben and Ben. Thank you, Moira. Thank you, that. But there's always a scourge that I'd like to also discuss in particular. And I'm curious as what do you have to say about this, which is the new manifestations of, number one, informal Tagalog, which by extension includes Taglish. And of course, I think this was, I've been reading this book about the topic, A Case for Filipino by Apolinar Parale. And he says that Tagalog, well, if you remember when they were deciding which one was the national language, he said that Tagalog was the most flexible and the most capable of adapting different words, like what it's siniserox, like anything that's like a new scientific gadget is said, like kaka-computer, Kodakan,
Pidgeotary.
Yeah, it has that adaptability that was not present in Bisaya, Hiligaynon, Ilocano, Kapampangan, etc. But at the same time, on the other end, there's just weird, adaptations, or like just make things easier. Like, for example, there's this phrase that that I hate, but let me just say it like in our podcast for the first time. Asko lang po. It's like asko lang po. Like may I ask something in English? But in Tagalog, it's much easier to say pwede magtanong. Less words, So I was like, well, perhaps it's hard to type. That it's mostly in Twitter, or more like need ko po. It's like, kailangan ko po. Well, to be fair, kailangan is a longer word. So, iniksi nila, need ko po kasi, or something. So it's like, it's just so weird. So, and I think, and I've caught you being guilty of this. It's weird. It's completely perfect Tagalog. But it's like, ang resulta ng mga process na ganyan is, that was Tagalog or something. So is lang eh. As there's already a linking verb that exists for is, and that's I. And nawala na yung I. So parang sinabi ko nga, nag-post ako sa FB, mapatay na ang salitang I. Gamitin na natin yung is. Is na lang ang gamitin natin. So what do you think about that? And ikaw din naman.
I'm relatively split with that. Again, I would simply answer with practice. I would rather address it with practice. But again, if you want my opinion on it, I'm split between being a purist on such matters, being a purist, or again, language is vibrant if it's under the hold of society. So just let it develop under its own terms, even if it looks ugly. I mean, the Latin died because it's the most perfect language. It's so rigid, so it's dead right now, except for again the Vatican still using the Latin, and some right-wing nutcrackers here in the Philippines still conducting Latin masses.
Hey, it's a beautiful practice and it should be preserved. It shouldn't be shoved in people's throats, definitely. But
as far as my experience of those Latin masses concerned, bloody hell, those are right-wing people.
Well.
In the homily.
Okay. Yeah, you can't choose your allies.
The only thing that is missing in that homily, as far as I listened to it, I think the church was in Quezon City. I will not name it because the only thing that was missing in that homily was the word crusade.
Right. Oh, wow. Okay. Well,
nahiya ka pa, Father, yung sinabing crusade.
Old language, old politics, and old thoughts.
You're right about that. So,
well, I mean, if making things easier, and save up on words, because of course Twitter has a word or character count. So yeah, and then practicality is sure. I mean, even in speaking, but at the same time, again, this might be, I'm not sure if this is a big enough reason versus practicality. I see the practicality element. The problem is, there's a problem with the integrity of the language. Personally, it's probably just me, but code switching confuses me. Like when my thought process, like what you said, depending on the language that you use, you have a different personality or mindset. Now, when people use two languages in one sentence, sometimes three, it's
Sino
like,
ka ba? Putang ina. Sino ka ba?
exactly. Parang, ano nangyari dito? Parang,
Kilala mo ba sarili mo?
Nakahilo kaya. So when I read Taglish,
is there is there a link with is there a link between the absence of a concrete identity in contemporary society and the mixing of languages?
Yeah. Well, that's the weird thing, because I believe I'm trying to remember the book. I do know that that's precisely the argument, wherein pluralistic societies with multiple languages tend to have a problem consolidating as a nation. I think right now what's happening.
That's a plain fact.
What's that? I'm trying to remember, because obviously I think we know that. If you remember, the Basque region, if I'm not mistaken, in Spain, they tried to secede precisely because they also have their language and their separation from the mainland Spain is clear, because they have a different language, different culture, different literature. And so they're able to at least, they have a solid identity for themselves that is distinct from the Castilian.
No, that's you have the Castilian. Are you referring to the Catalans? They also have their own unique language.
Right. And
So
but
Hispanic,
the main
is
Hispanic. Yeah.
Another reason about the Basque would be, again, just it's not only about culture and the ancientness of its language.
Yeah.
The Basque region is deeply radical. So it's one of the bedrocks of Spanish anarchism. That's why they also don't like the government there. Anyway, going back.
Yeah. Well, and there's also, and I think this is clear. I mean, the reason why Duterte won right now is precisely because of the wide Bisaya vote. In fact, I think to this day it hasn't been questioned, but the only predictor of like voting blocks and voting patterns is not even religion, but it's ethno-linguistic groups. In other words, there's a Ilocano vote, a Bisaya vote, Tagalog. Well, I'm sorry if it's a Tagalog vote. The Tagalog vote is split. There's Hiligaynon vote. So that's the fact that there are different nations even underneath the Philippines. You can argue that our nation is not even that consolidated. It's really divided among these languages, and I think if ever we can consolidate, we have to take these languages seriously. I think the reason why Duterte won is he was able to get that sentiment wherein people find that politics culture is overly centralized in Imperial Manila, which is presumably Tagalog and English. In fact, I think I've mentioned this several times in classes. Students are technically forced not only to be bilingual but trilingual, especially when they're not from the National Capital Region. They're usually from from Cebu or Iloilo, so they also know Tagalog, they know English, and they know their own hometown's regional language.
Yeah, good for them.
So at least for now, for those who are able to adapt, it makes them trilingual, which means that they're presumably more flexible thinkers, and healthy minds. So that, multilingual or polyglots tend to be intelligent, very intelligent.
Yeah, I'm a lazy polyglot. I'm using.
But but it just confuses people of like lesser intelligence. Sorry to say, not everyone's born intelligent, capable of being a disciplined polyglot. It's depressing. So what do you think? I mean, do you observe that? People being forced to be polylingual.
Being forced is such a strong term, really. But yeah, probably forced by circumstances. The question of language in the Philippines right now is the least of our concerns, as far as I'm concerned.
Why?
We have we have deeper issues on our political values.
Deeper how?
Our values are in deep trouble right now. We are still trying to establish our values, but then again, values are expressible through language, but still,
by
the shared
and ambag, as we have discussed in our work before, they're embedded in language.
I know, embedded, expressed in, but it's still distinct. But then again, we need to take those into consideration. How much of the ethno-linguistic vote actually translates into single blocks? How many of them actually translate in single blocks? Is it about the language itself, or its employment, or its deployment that counts?
Right.
Well,
Because
what matters?
even Gore Macabagaloroy herself, when she was campaigning, she would speak she knows at least 4 languages. Tagalog, English, Kapampangan, of which is, of course, she's a native in Pampanga, and I think Cebu or Cebuano, which are like the 4 most spoken. I'm not sure about Kapampangan, of course, that's her hometown, but yeah, so she was able to learn those languages and deploy them. And people don't like her, but
are these blocks? You know what? Okay, regarding its deployment, I'll be a bit critical here. Are these blocks of ethno-linguistic votes? Are they based merely on a naive sense of pride? A naive sense of local pride?
We should better ask them, honestly. I can't say that for sure.
There are people who are actually saying that, don't speak to me in Tagalog, you're in this specific place. I've met those people. So,
really? And you call it naive, why?
Naive because they have pride in their locality. It's narrow in a sense, first and foremost. It's childlike because, again, that is where they grew up. Okay, that is, they didn't. I mean, come on. There are other places in the Philippines. Your locale is not the only thing in this country. So is that based on a naive sense of pride in the absence of a national sense of pride that we are stuck with this local? Anyway, I'm frustrated by it to an extent. I will not try to unify it into one single language. Again, I don't want to go into that debate. So to our listeners in the provinces who, again, speak your own language, again, I'm not arguing for its unification under Tagalog or Filipino.
Yeah.
But just an expression of a question, really. Why do you insist? Why do you insist on your local language?
Well, I can't say that I've encountered the same people before. I don't know those people. In fact, whenever I do go into another, it's not often, but whenever I do, they normally are nice enough to speak in Tagalog, even though it's not great. I mean, my Tagalog isn't great either, but yeah, so we just try to, as long as we understand each other, that's important. I can't say that there is a solid nationalist movement as what you seem to be a point alluding to.
It's not really nationalist, it's more localist.
Okay, fine. Localist or like hard purist on that. I'm not sure if it'll be good to investigate. But I don't want to discount, at the very least, of local pride as being naive, because especially when your communities and your your very world is at stake. When the kind of language is so important, like to the point where even philosophers like Wittgenstein saying that reducing all the philosophical problems into language and how language is interpreted and perceived. If you read books like Steven Pinker, that's basically how people structure the world. And while it cannot be like as observable as, say, for instance, a problem in with regards to the drug war or COVID, it's again embedded in how we approach each other as society and values itself. So I would not, I don't want to be as dismissive as you are with regards to our language.
I'm not dismissive. I'm not dismissive.
Well,
I'm just
you said that there were more problems.
Yeah, don't accept. But that's a fact. I'm not saying that it's fact. I'm not saying that it's not important. I'm just saying that there are more problems that are more important. But okay, I'll give you one. I'll give you one example.
Say that, wait, just a moment. Okay. Just a moment.
Go ahead.
Can we say that? I mean, the fact that we have a divide in the issue of, say, for instance, human rights and human life, cannot not be at the very least. Well, can we not find insight in the fact that there are values in language? You even told me, I think just earlier a while ago, yung humanism and maging makatao, hindi may anyong tao pero hindi naman makatao, diba? Is that like aswang, etc. That kind of discourse. So can't you find at the very least the political divides and locate them and trace them back into the language that we use with regards to like how we describe certain things, objects, values?
There are values behind those languages.
Yes.
I would rather look at that. Now, the language, of course, is necessary to complete the picture. I will not discount it. Again, you're judging me as thoroughly dismissive again, which is not true. I'm not dismissing language. I'm just saying that there's something
You can
deeper
play the
beneath
recording,
it.
but okay, yeah.
There is still something dismissive. That's something dismissive, something deeper than language. And I would rather focus on that. If you want to focus on language, then go ahead. But the values, I'll give you one example. Does kindness,
I mean, can values exist without? I mean, independent of language? It's almost as if. Well, I'm not.
I'm not separating it. Do you get the picture here? I'm not separating values from language. I'm just saying that values are deeper. For example, kindness as a value. Does it require specific language to be expressed and acted upon? You can be kind without saying that you are kind, or without labeling it as kindness.
Well, the fact that you can label something as kaplastikan, the fact that we use that word and it's embedded in our language, the fact that the way we interpret things.
That's the value of sincerity. That's basically how we try to attach kindness with sincerity. So yeah, language would have a role in that label. But still, I say value itself.
And it is an expression. I don't know. It's because I find it difficult to even study or even observe a value without even analyzing. Or, I mean, you may say that they're not independent, and definitely not. But I think the value itself is the value itself is the word that it's used to describe it. Like, for instance, the fact that like there's a study that says that the language that having a wider emotional vocabulary is usually associated with better mental health, because rather than just saying you're sad, you're able to say different words, like maybe you're impatient, you're anxious, you're disappointed, rather than saying mad, sad, and happy, like it's having a wider emotional vocabulary, being able to identify a particular emotion, allows you to, at the very least, observe it and understand it better. So our perception, understanding of a value is based on the labels we ascribe to it. So I don't think you can even you may not be separating or discounting, but you're putting it in a hierarchy, and I don't think you can do that. It's tied together and should be tied as equal. But again, this might be too much for our raw session. But
no, equal is again. Let's just say language is a mediator between the mind and values. It's the mind making values known to itself, and to an extent, it's a mechanism for the mind or the person, the individual, to make values known to others.
Right.
Now, why am I not saying it's equal? Because there are certain things in both the mind and in our values that need not have language for it to be expressed. That's why you have guttural expressions. They're not languages, but they are expressions of what goes on in the mind and in our values. Pagsigaw,
for example,
is shouting a language.
But of course, based on the
languages.
Well, they can be, again, more often than not, they are expressed in things like, like the name of the podcast, PI, putang ina o pucha, di ba? So
yeah, that's another level.
Yeah.
So that's the interaction producing more things.
Right.
So, and there's a cockroach right in front of my screen. So killed that. No,
this is raw. You are knowing this.
No, my window screen, not my laptop screen. My window screen. Ew. Bastards, you're gonna die later.
My EPs. Yeah. Anyway, this is way.
But again, let me just clarify.
Yeah.
They are not separate. You cannot separate language with values. When I place them in a hierarchy, even the hierarchy itself is relatively flat. But I just cannot. There are certain things in both the mind and in our values that cannot be expressed in language. Again, language being defined here as a systematic use of words. So not everything in the mind, not everything in our values can be encompassed. Not everything in our behavior can be encompassed by the systematic use of words. Unless you define language in a thoroughly broad manner that encompasses all utterances, making the concept itself virtually useless.
So, well, then we move on to Heideggerian things, when you say utterances like pagbigkas, that
No, no,
is,
no. Utterances.
it's not, yeah, it's not
Pagbigkas is
always,
pronunciation.
it's not always in words, but, uh, uh, like, here's one thing, like, there are definitely, there are definitely parts of like our psyche and our values. Well, that's I would agree with that. That's not always captured in language, but eventually it goes, once it's more solidified and more integrated into our like routines and our consciousness. They eventually become languages. I suppose you don't need me to tell you that, but at the same time, once they matter, eventually the system of our language is still embedded in that in the political divides of our values. So what you're expressing with utterances are not even, how you say, not all the time, well, even of the political sphere. So if you're saying that language, it can be separated from the political problems we have today, I heavily disagree, if that's what you're saying.
I'm not. Did I say it?
Well, you said a while ago, you said as if like the problems in our languages, there are more important problems in our languages. I'd say that
it's not separating. I'm not saying, I didn't say that language is not the problem. They're just something, they're just things that are deeper than it, which I already explained.
No, that's what you said, but at the same time, like, you can't even, I don't know, you can't even separate it.
I'm not separating it. No one is. No one is trying to separate language.
Well, when you say something is more important, is it? Aren't you saying that's separate?
No,
you're saying one thing.
No, it's
things.
They are distinct. Did I say separate? No.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're now.
How can you say something is more important than one thing? If it's as if you're like isolating it.
No, does not follow.
Yeah.
It is distinction. It's not isolation. That doesn't follow. Just to be clear about it. Probably, I don't know. I don't know how my mind works based on how you interpret, but it doesn't follow for me as far as I'm concerned. Whenever I say something is more important, I'm not saying that the other thing is not, nor am I saying that the other thing is separate. Whenever I say it's distinct, it's just distinct.
I mean, even if, I'm still trying to say, like, how can you say one thing is more important when, although it is attached to it, it's embedded into it, it's not as important?
Because language cannot capture everything in our minds and in our values.
But when it comes to politics,
your idea
it's
that
always expressed in language, is it not? Even even our values is expressed in our words, and based on what we label.
Not everything in politics. Not everything in politics can be expressed in language.
And what are these the important parts of politics? Because if you're talking about like non-verbal utterances, how important are they?
They got Duterte elected into office
with grunts and moans.
Yeah, basically that.
Really,
the justifications probably came after.
That I cannot necessarily follow.
But there are, of course, subconscious factors behind this godforsaken example. Did Duterte won because of what he said? No, what he said more or less appealed to subconscious things. Basically, our daddy issues.
Yeah,
which I am labeling, but that's just
totally
temporary label.
Associate with a daddy. Daddy is definitely a part of a language system. Yeah. Well, anyway, I think we spent too much time on this, but
we can try
to wrap this up.
Yeah.
We can try to wrap this up by just saying, like, even at the very least, how foreigners see us. We're mostly known as one of the quote unquote better English speakers in our region, but the weird thing is that it's very mixed. Like, even I remember, if you remember, like when we were still in Shanghai, there was this in the open. Well, no, you weren't there. Oh no, I'm so sorry. Well, when I was in an open mic, one of the stand-up people talked to me and said, "Well, I went to the Philippines one time, watched stand-up there, and I noticed that they have the joke is in English, but the punchline is in Tagalog, and sometimes vice versa. So it's like, why? They don't understand it. So, like, if someone in a way wants to study the Philippines, maybe starts the way of life, and they try to learn our language, it's like it's never. They try to learn the rules, and yet the rules are not even followed, which again connects to our relationship with rules. Hindi naman natin sumusunod ng mga
we create our own. We have a good way to mess up the old alien rules.
So I suppose it's like if you can't even follow the rules of our grammar, we can't even follow the rules of our society. So it could be tied if it's very. The fact that let me just say, I just want to say this before we end this episode, is that honestly, that my main language and my mother tongue is English. And because of that, it has alienated me from most of the people I was around, my peers, right up until college. And that's as a result, I did my best to learn Tagalog, both for academic and for to be a part of the society. And so I learned eventually, like I tried my best to learn Tagalog. I'm capable of speaking straight sentences in Tagalog. And yet now I know that everyone in social media or even around us, they don't even speak like straight Tagalog. They don't even say salamat. You say thank you. People say thank you po. Like, or like, it's like it's we have a word, it's salamat. So it's like, I'm like, why do, or like the word hello po. It's being uttered a lot. It's like, can't you say hello, or like it's English, and we say magandang umaga po. Well, of course it's longer, so it's overly formal, but say hello po, hi po. So it's like, so it's confusing to me, and to be honest, it feels like our society, I don't know, it just feels like it doesn't matter. The rules of our language don't matter, and as someone who has invested time, it feels insulting, really, and invested time in learning the language, only to learn that it doesn't really matter. It takes an emotional toll on me, to be honest. It makes me disappointed in our society, and at the same time, while it might be unfair, it might be elitist, you can see the manifestations of it, like with the way that we construct our sentences, and even the way that we, kaya ba natin panindigan ng isang pag-iisip kapag hindi naman diretso yung wika natin, di ba? Panindigan mo parang hanggang sa huling salita ng isang pangungusap, tapusin mo na, manatili ka sa Tagalog, ba't nag-English ka pa?
The thing is, again, okay, I understand your frustration about it. Probably rules, as far as the history of languages are concerned, we would not have the English we have right now if rules weren't broken.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned, the rules or the grammar of language, they are more of suggestions on how to ensure that it would be elegant within the certain time frame. Times change. I think what we can do is to judge language based on whether it is still elegant, and whether it is still beautiful, and whether it is practical. I think those are the standards that the human society have used to adjust language. So whenever the grammar of a language whenever it becomes a hard, fast rule, that language dies. Simple as that. As far as the issue of languages are concerned, that's when they die, when the grammar becomes more of a rule than a suggestion. So yeah, but I do share your concern. So I think something that can alleviate your stress over it is, without you being elitist, of course, is to judge whether the deployment of such combinations and offenses to grammatical suggestions or standards, is it still beautiful? Is it still elegant? Is it still practical? So I think
that's with our friends with Anek. They said there. It's about an ad in a post in Facebook, and it's talking about naghahanap po ng pwede gumawa ng homework po, like okay na legit din sana, and it's like it's even rhythmic. Okay na legit din sana. Kinanda ko pa. Okay na legit din sana. Okay na legit din sana, and it's beautiful even in the combination of it. And hello po, it's
flows.
Yeah, it flows. I don't want to be too much of a stickler, but again, I think. And of course, it's usually somewhere in the middle of being a purist and, of course, flexible. But I suppose one thing I want to ask before we end is at what point can it be considered like a problematic when Tagalog is overly stretched. Can we say that there's a point where it can be overly stretched?
It can overly stretched. And what?
And whether when is it necessary to like insist on rules? Because it's only I borrow this argument from Bishop Barron. It's that of course rules were made for man and not man for rules, but rules itself give freedom and give structure. Like the fact that even Bishop Barron uses the metaphor of baseball. If there are no rules, if there's no umpire, mag-aaway lang sila. Nag-aawayan sila. But that's why you need someone to call, if it's in or out, safe, etc. So imagine having do we need a referee, for our language, or in a way, when can we elevate, or how can we, should we give up trying to elevate our language?
No, we should not. We should not try to give up and elevate our language. But it is not about the presence or absence of a referee. It's more of the nature or the character of the referee. And again, as far as I'm concerned, for your case, be a stickler, but be a stickler not for hard, fast rules, but be a stickler for elegance and beauty and conveying meaning, okay, and practicality. So I think those should be the standards. So when can Filipino or when can Tagalog, let's just be specific, just not to piss off some non-Tagalog folks, but when can Tagalog be overstretched? Siguro kung yung salitang ginagamit ay nahalo na sa ibang wika na pangit ng pakinggan, unang-una, wala nang saysay o hindi maayos ang pagbibigay ng saysay sa isang bagay. Kung ginagamit mo, kung pwedeng maging halimbawa ng pangit na pagkakataga.
Really?
Jeje mo nang naisip ko.
Jeje mo. Okay.
That's
oppose.
Yeah. It is. Then again, it's just probably an aesthetic judgment for my case. But ano pa bang siguro, I think I do share one of your pet peeves, which is switching codes in the middle of the damn thing. So I do agree with that one. You must be careful in switching codes if you do want to. Again, if you want to be careful, just speak straight in one sentence. When can it be overstretched? I haven't heard any misuse of the Filipino language yet in such a way. I don't know, probably I'm just too liberal or whatnot, which matters. But,
wow.
Are there ugly uses of our language? Sobrang nakariri-mari mong paggamit.
There's an old thing called salumpuet for chair, and no one ever uses salumpuet.
Ginagamit pa yun.
Antipara nga in it. So,
antipara nga ginagamit ko yun sa your spectacles.
Antipara.
Yung siguro ang pinakapangit na paggamit ng wika na narinig ko recently, yung kay Duque.
Winarak.
Pakapangit.
Oh God.
Wala sa konteksto. Either bastos ka o... Kasi ang konteksto kasi, ang konteksto ay inapakan ng dangal. Niyurakan. Ang dangal ng DOH. Kaya wala sa konteksto ang winarak kasi anong winarak? Winarak ang yung mismong institusyon ba ang winarak? Anong saysay anong ibig sabihin na sinasabi mo? Anong kahulugan na sinasabi? Winarak, sinira ba yung organisasyon? Hindi. Yung pagkatao mo lang naman ng sinira, hindi yung organisasyon. So yun ang maling konteksto yun. Maling konteksto, mali ang gamit ng wika. Kaya ang pangit. Ang pangit makakagamit. Siguro kung sinabi niyo na inalipusta o niyurakan niyo ang dangal ng DOH, mas aayon pa ako sa kanyang paggamit ng Filipino. Pero sabi, winarak ano ka?
Just for Englisheros like myself, or like among our listeners or even foreign listeners, what is winarak?
I think I already said winarak is tear apart, destroy. Basically, tear apart would be the most appropriate translation of it.
But it's usually used for the context of orifices. Orifices, yeah. We can say that. I mean, I have marked these episodes as explicit, so...
Salitang kanto, warak. Naupo nang walang sumakay sa bisikleta na walang upuan, warak. Ay, nako. Ewan ko.
Mhm.
Pero yun, isang halimbawa yun ng nakakasuklam na paggamit ng wika.
Mhm. At sana'y alalahanin natin ang natutunan natin ngayon dito para manatiling maganda at ano, naubos ka Tagalog ko.
No, basta yung
Ang
Tagalog.
ating wika. Or like, how do you say elegance? You say,
Elegance. Wait. Trying to...
I mean, dapat...
Mag-Google Translate nga. Mag-Google Translate.
Pero dapat, pwede naman hiramin ng mga bagay-bagay, mga ibang salita galing sa ibang wika. Pero
Elegante.
sana ay may integridad, ang sarili nating wika. At, yeah, basta, basta integridad ng ating wika. Sana. At pwede rin at matututo natin yung mga iba't ibang mga wika sa Pilipino para kaya natin kausapin ng ibang mga tao na taga ibang rehiyon. Diba?
Na patuloy ang pagiging mahalimuyak ng ating paggamit sa ating salita. Hindi mabaho o laging angkop sa konteksto. Nagbibigay saysay sa ating pakikipagtalastasan, pakikipag-ugnayan sa ibang tao. So, ang wika naman kasi ay batay sa pakikipag-ugnayan ng mga Pilipino. Kaya bumabaho ang wika kasi mabaho rin yung ugnayan.
Mabaho ang ugnayan.
Pag nagmumurahan yung mga nagmumurahan ng mga tao, damonyo ka.
Para sa mga nakikinig na hindi pa nakikinig sa mga PI eskwela, ito ang isa sa mga pinagdiretso na Tagalog na binikas natin sa sa mga ating mga podcast. Wala pang yung podcast.
Uy, gilas pa lang ang salin ng elegance.
Gilas.
Weird. Magara is vain. Magara. Pero gilas pa lang okay.
So yeah.
Weird.
Anything else before we wrap this raw?
Mula sa ating mga takapaginig. Mga takapaginig na gumagamit ng Taglish. Sana yung paggamit nyo ay
may hangganan.
Hindi naman may hangganan, pero ang hangganan ay dapat ayon sa pagsasama-sama ng pagiging practical at pagka may saysay ng pagbigkas ninyo ng ating wika. Yun naman. Again, beautiful and elegant. Practical.
Kagandahan at gilas.
Gilas nga.
Gilas. Ayun, salamat sa pakikinig sa ating espesyal na
PI Hilaw.
PI Hilaw. Yeah. Our unscripted discussion of the Filipino language. Hope you enjoyed that, and apologies for our foreign listeners. For now, our service is primarily for the Filipinos. Para sa mga sa Pilipino sa buong mundo. At salamat sa pakikinig at hanggat sa muling pagkikita.
Pagkikita. Magandang gabi, mga ka-PI.